Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. As part of our replay series this summer, I am revisiting some of the most important episodes from our podcast archives. These are conversations and lessons that are absolutely as relevant today as when they first aired. Today, we have treating versus preventing your fibromyalgia symptoms. Now, I chose this episode specifically because it's actually the lesson that I am living myself this summer. It is a whole lot easier to stay feeling good than it is to try to recover after pushing too hard and causing symptoms. So while this episode is about fibromyalgia, it's also a pretty good explanation for why you're getting a replay instead of a new episode. Now, I also want to mention that the resources and the show notes that I mentioned in this episode are all still available, and you'll find them at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/144. You'll also find that in the link right here in your podcast app. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stackelhouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 144. Today, I want to talk to you about the difference between preventing and treating. Whether we're talking about pain, fatigue, or brain fog, there is a big difference between preventing your symptoms and trying to treat your symptoms once they've flared up. Once your symptoms have gotten away from you, it is like a runaway train. It is so difficult to catch that train and get it stopped. Think of all the movies about that exact scenario. And so sometimes when that happens, you just need to let your symptoms or your flare run its course and run itself out of steam, just like letting that runaway train slow down on its own. But that doesn't feel that good, right? It leaves you feeling like you're not in control of your situation or your body. And so that's where prevention comes in. The key to prevention is knowing ahead of time what you need to do to feel your best. It's also crucial to see and understand the warning signs that your body is giving you. So today, I'm giving you tips on how to shift your thinking from treating after you experience those symptoms to preventing those symptoms in the first place. I'll also give you some practical tips for how you can start to hear what your body is telling you before she has to scream. Now, before we dig in, I do want to remind you that the information you hear today is not meant to be medical advice, and it is not meant to replace working with a qualified medical provider. Instead, I hope these will give you some new tips, new ideas that you can take to your providers and discuss with them. So, what is it about fibromyalgia that makes this so difficult? And let's be honest, it is more difficult with fibromyalgia, and there's a couple reasons why. The first reason is something called explosive synchronization. This term is used in the tech world to describe an unstable electrical system. Now, you might be wondering how that applies to fibromyalgia. In this particular study, the researchers were looking to try to actually create a computer model of the fibro brain and what happens when we experience pain. And this was the best explanation. It's the same thing that happens in an electrical system that is unstable. The term explosive synchronization is pretty much what it sounds like. Synchronization, right? Things happening all together, all at once, and explosive, like boom. So, with fibromyalgia, what this describes is that sensation that we have when we hurt one thing and all of a sudden everything else hurts. We stub our toe. Next thing you know, your whole body is in a fibro flare. Explosive, boom, and synchronization, everything is hurting together. So, explosive synchronization does explain that phenomenon. The other term that is used, not just in fibromyalgia, but in other things as well, is central sensitization. This is where your central nervous system becomes overly sensitized. The best way to explain that to you is this is where your body starts processing everything as pain, whether it's painful or not. Somebody gives you a hug, it hurts. Hugs aren't supposed to hurt, but with central sensitization, it can. Your body gets really good at processing pain and it starts to see everything as pain. There's this sort of switch that gets flipped in your head, and by head, I mean in your brain, in your nervous system, where everything starts to be overly sensitized. Everything starts to hurt all together, that synchronization, and that is that fibro experience. Fibromyalgia is also an amplifier. So any other symptoms that we have, fibromyalgia is going to take that and just crank the volume knob up. If you've got an old knee injury, or if you have IBS, or if you have a bad disc in your back, fibromyalgia is going to make all of those things hurt more. And then the explosive synchronization is going to make everything else hurt too. Yeah, it's not real fun, is it? When I think of fibro pain, when I think of that switch in my brain that gets flipped when we have too much painful stimulus, I like to think of it as a pressure gauge. Now, talking about those movies, you've probably seen a scenario where there is a pressure gauge, right? The pressure in the pipes, they're getting too high and the pipes are going to explode. The nuclear reactor is going to melt down because it's getting too hot, too much pressure. That's what our fibro bodies are like. And so when I'm in a situation, like let's say I'm getting a massage and the massage therapist is maybe using too much pressure in a sensitive area, I can feel that pressure gauge rising. And as it rises, I know I have to do something to release that pressure or it's going to overflow. It's going to flip over into being a fibro flare. We talked about this a little bit back in episode 142 with Deb Thompson when we were talking about preparing for surgery. Same kind of thing. You want to get used to what your body is telling you, to what that feels like in your body when that pressure is rising, so that you can recognize it and do something about it. Those nuclear reactors, right? If we didn't recognize that this is warning, this is danger, we wouldn't do what we needed to do to keep that meltdown from happening. And your body's no different. So, how do we do that? The first step is to pay attention. It's a really practical type of mindfulness. Mindfulness has been described as paying attention in the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally, as if your life depended on it. And that's what I mean here. Paying attention in each given moment. How does your body feel? Does it feel better if you do this? Does it feel worse if you do that? And starting to pay attention to what your body is telling you. One of the best ways to start to work through all of this is to write your body's owner's manual. I talk about this in episode 47. And of course, we'll have a link in today's show notes where you can find that episode and the worksheets that go with that exercise. Just go to today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/144. Now, in episode 47, I talk about how you can write your own owner's manual, the owner's manual for your own body. There are worksheets, there are prompts, there are things to work through that help you get more in touch to what your body is saying and what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Just to give you an example, I have mentioned many times on this podcast that I have chronic headaches and I have migraines. And one of the things that I've discovered is if my headache is at a certain place, let's say my headache is maybe a 1 to a 4, I can do different things to bring that headache down than if my headache's at a 7 or an 8. I need a whole different set of tools once my headache gets that bad. So making a note of those things, really planning out, if I feel this way, this helps me feel better. Or if I feel this way, this will make me feel worse. And start writing it all down. Now, let me give you some examples of what those things might be that you are writing down in your body's owner's manual. It could be things like, I feel better when I get at least 9 to 10 hours of sleep. I do better if I can move more slowly and purposefully. Being in a rush puts me in a fibro flare. I feel better when my stress level is lower. It is important for me to meditate every day. My body doesn't like to start working out right away. It's very important for me to warm up. I have got to warm up before I move my body. Epsom salts are a great way for me to manage my symptoms when I overdo. And then the question, could I do an Epsom salt bath ahead of time to prevent a flare-up? So your owner's manual is about the things that you learn about yourself that are true, but it's also a place for you to explore what may or may not be true and give you a place to start recognizing the early warning signs. So for instance, for me, one of the things that I noticed with my headaches is before I get a headache, I will notice that my shoulders are really tense. And then after paying attention for a while, I noticed that before my shoulders get really tense, I start getting this sort of a pressure feeling in my forehead. And then I noticed before I started getting that pressure feeling in my forehead, I would start spelling things funny. I would spell them phonetically instead of the way they're supposed to be spelled. Phonetically, instead of being with a PH, would be spelled with an F, right? So every time I noticed a symptom, I would try to notice what happened before that symptom. Now, I will tell you, I have had fibromyalgia now almost 20 years. And so it's been 20 years of looking for earlier and earlier warning signs. And so I can notice things pretty quick these days. And you might not know until you're experiencing it. That's okay. It takes time to start to discover this. What can also sometimes be helpful is to talk to the people who live with you, who work with you, if you know them well enough, friends, family, and ask them what they notice. I guarantee you, they notice things about you that you are not even aware of. And the more you notice, the more you can understand what your body is telling you, the easier it is to get in the prevention, not so much trying to treat your flare after it's happened. For example, let's say that you end up in pain every time you go out in the garden and garden. We would then start paying attention to that and looking at, okay, first of all, can we take pain meds before you go out? Those are going to be way more effective than trying to take pain meds after you're done because it'll take less pain meds and you'll recover more quickly. Again, like the saying is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So less pain meds if you do it before than if you try to recover after. We can also start to look at things like, How sunny was it? How hot was it? How humid was it? How long were you out there? Could you have different tools? Do you need something to sit on or kneel on? Different clothes you could wear? Would a hat make a difference? How about sunglasses? All of these things are part of the prevention. We can also do things like set a timer to make sure you're not out there too long and you take a break before you feel bad. There are so many things that we can do once we start paying attention and start noticing what it is that is contributing to our flare up, to our pain, to our fatigue, to our brain fog. And again, thinking about preventing it. So, if your owner's manual says that you don't do so well in noisy environments where there's a lot going on, and you have a good friend that invites you to coffee, maybe you suggest a quieter coffee shop, and then you can enjoy it more and not end up in a flare after. Some of the other tips that I want to give you for ways that you can prevent, obviously, I mentioned taking your pain meds before you do something, not just taking pain meds after. So, one of the things I did for many years, I did a lot of traveling. That certainly has slowed down since 2020. But before that, I, at one point, was taking a flight about once a month and take some medication before the flight instead of waiting until I was hurting and then taking something. I would just automatically take it. For many years, I would also do the same thing when I'm sleeping in a bed that's not my own. I still sometimes will do that. If I'm going to be somewhere and I know that is one of the triggers for my fibro pain is sleeping in a bed that's too hard. So a lot of times I will, even if it's just Advil that I'm taking, I still will take something before I get into bed. Because think about it. If I'm tossing and turning all night long because I'm in pain, not only am I going to be in pain when I wake up and have to try to recover from that, but I'm also going to hurt more because I haven't gotten enough sleep. I'm going to be tired. I'm going to be brain fogged. I'm for sure going to be cranky. So take the pain meds before, and in this case, get good sleep, and it makes the whole thing better, right? So pain meds before, medication before is a great example of prevention. Stopping before you hurt. So using things like the Pomodoro Technique, which we will link to in today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/144. So using the Pomodoro Technique, which is a pattern of working and resting. So for example, the Pomodoro Technique, the way that they teach it is that you work for 25 minutes and take a 5-minute break, and you just repeat that. But I will tell you, after coaching people for as long as I have, fibro people need to work less and rest more. So that might look like 20 minutes of work and then 15 minutes of rest. So if you're doing something like cleaning out the garage or organizing your office or doing laundry, whatever it might be, have that pattern of work and rest. Set a timer because I guarantee you will forget to stop and take that break. So take breaks, take rests, use the Pomodoro Technique, use your timer, all of that. Things like eating before you get super hungry. Blood sugar fluctuations can actually increase your pain levels, increase your fatigue, and increase your brain fog. So if you keep your blood sugar levels stable by eating on a consistent schedule and eating long burning fuels like protein, good healthy fats, that will really help prevention, right? It'll help prevent that pain, that brain fog, that fatigue. And yes, you may need a timer to remind you to eat. Think about your stress levels, right? Think about your pain levels. One of the things that I do with my headaches is I have this rule with myself that if my headache gets to a certain point, I have to do something about it. Now, if you've got a headache and it's like a 1 or a 2, those of us who live with headaches all the time, like that's nothing, right? And so I'm not going to go out and grab some pain meds just because I have a little bit of a headache. But if it gets to a certain point, I do have to, because it's that pressure gauge again, right? My pain is increasing. Now I have to do something or my nuclear reactor is going to blow. So definitely pay attention and have those rules with yourself. Put it in your owner's manual, write it down. Also, you can think about modifying, right? So, for instance, I used gardening earlier as an example, right? Maybe part of the modifications that you can do are things like having a little stool that you sit on instead of trying to bend down, or having different tools that you can use that are more comfortable on your hands. It could even be things like instead of gardening in the ground, you're using containers to garden with, bringing the dirt up higher to you, easier to manage. Maybe you're just growing a few flowers in pots instead of trying to do a whole garden. So think about modifications. What are ways that you can still enjoy what it is that you want to do, but make modifications to keep your body happy and to prevent pain? The other thing that you really need to do in the prevention of pain is to speak up for your needs. If you know you need to take a break, let's say you are going for a walk with some friends and you can walk maybe 10 minutes, but next thing they're going half an hour, you have got to speak up for your needs. Preventing pain, preventing your symptoms requires you to speak up for your needs. It does not help to speak for your needs after you are already in pain, after your symptoms are already out of control. You can't take a break when you've already ended up in a flare. You need to do that beforehand. So speak up for your needs. And that may include all kinds of things, right? There have been times, for instance, when I've been traveling, that I have done things like let the host know ahead of time, hey, can you have a bottle of distilled water for me? I need that for my CPAP machine. Can you give me the soft bed? There was one time, actually, it was pretty funny because the group I was with knew I had fibromyalgia, so they were giving me the real bed. And I'm like, actually, can I have the air mattress? Because then I can make it as soft as I need it to be. But speaking up for your needs and saying, hey, I need a snack. Hey, I need a break. Hey, I need to not go to that restaurant because it's always so noisy there and I always leave feeling terrible. Speaking up for your needs, whatever those things might be. And if you don't know what your needs are, that is an awesome place to start, right? That's where you work with your owner's manual, that episode 47, and the tips in there for figuring out what your needs are and making a note of them. So I'm going to leave today's episode a little on the short side compared to our others anyway, and leave you there. But the main thing that I want you to do, just going forward from here, your homework for this episode is to first and foremost start paying attention to how your body feels. How does it feel when you do different things? How does it help you come back to feeling your best or your normal? And how does it make you feel worse? And writing those down. We got fibro fog, folks. We're not going to remember. We're especially not going to remember in the middle of a flare. So write those down. It could be a note that's in your phone. It could be an actual notebook that you write it on. It doesn't matter. But make a note of the things that you realize are true about you, the things that you know your body is starting to tell you. I also want you to pay attention and visualize in your mind that pressure gauge. Where does your body feel at any given moment? Is that pressure gauge rising? Is that pressure gauge coming down? And what can you do to make sure you stay out of the red? So pay attention to that. The second thing that I want you to do is start thinking about how you can prevent your symptoms. And if it feels like too much to think about preventing everything, because that's everything, that's a lot, just think about pain. Think about the things that cause you pain. And if you're going into a situation that would normally cause you pain, what could you do to help prevent that? Maybe you're going on a picnic. I'm recording this beginning of September. Let's say instead it is a school soccer game, football game. You're going to be sitting in the bleachers, right? It's going to be painful. What can you do to help prevent that pain? Maybe that means bringing a pillow to sit on. Maybe that means bringing hand warmers to make sure you don't get too cold. Maybe that means bringing snacks so your blood sugar doesn't go out of whack. Maybe that means you're actually wearing earplugs or noise canceling headphones because it's too noisy. Maybe you choose to sit in a different spot, not right next to the band. Whatever it might be, start to think about prevention and how you can prevent that pain. And then the last thing I have for you, again, is just looking at episode 47 and begin building your owner's manual. That will be where you can write down all of those things that you're learning about yourself, how to prevent things, what causes what, and just getting to know your body better. All right. So to wrap this up for you today, I've got this week's listener shout out. This comes from Krista in Texas. And she's using my word here, folks. Krista says, I was hopeless until I found your podcast. You gave me hope and made me realize that fibromyalgia can be manageable. Thank you so much for that, Krista. Hope, that is what I'm here for. I exist on this earth to encourage hope. And so if you are feeling more hopeful, if you feel like there is a light at the end of this fibro tunnel, then I've done my job. But yes, fibromyalgia can be very manageable. It takes doing some of the things I talked about here today. It takes being aware of what your body is telling you. It takes shifting your mindset from treating to preventing your symptoms. It takes being more aware of everything, but absolutely, it is totally doable, totally manageable. So thank you again, Krista, and thank you for your words there. The last thing I want to mention as we wrap up today is that I am working on getting the podcast over to YouTube. I have recorded videos of all of our interviews, and they've been on the Fibromyalgia Podcast website, but we are in the process of building our YouTube channel. I don't know exactly when that will be done. So when you're hearing this, if you are somebody who likes to watch videos, by all means, just go check out the Fibromyalgia Podcast on YouTube. If it's not there yet, it should be soon. All right. See you all back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.